Well, hello everyone. It has been a while. It has been a very, 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 very long time since YouTube. What's YouTube? I haven't used YouTube in so long. It's kind of crazy. And it's like nearly 4 o'clock in England in mid-December, so watch as it slowly becomes a cave in this room. I have put on some ambient lighting, but the sun is going, so prepare for this cold light to disappear and then it'll become warm fairy lights. Hi. Hello. I don't know how long it's been since I last did a video on YouTube. It's been a hot minute. This is going to be an episode of I'm Exci-tea-ed, where I drink a cup of tea and try and do my thoughts before my tea gets cold, but when did that ever happened? I want to talk about House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones because I'm excited. It's been a hot minute since I last was like, content that I'm excited for, must talk about it, must get it out my brain, even if no one watches it. No one watches my YouTube. Like, the most viewed videos I've ever had on YouTube has been talking about Game of Thrones on other people's channels, and even those have like maybe 50 views, and that's like, woo, 50 views. Like, the world is a different place to what it was when I was doing YouTube more regularly. And you know, what I need in order to be good at YouTube is a lot of editing time and production values and all of that jazz. And that's not going to happen because I'm lazy and I am not able to form enough brain space for me to make that a priority in my life. I have a full-time job. It is what it is. But every once in a while, I want to use YouTube as my therapy to get my nerdy things out of my brain in a content form, which I can then look back and go, haha, what dress were you wearing and why were you wearing it? I wore this dress because it's kind of Game of Thrones-y, because all of the southern ladies wear wrap dresses, although I definitely was spending a lot of time going, stay on my shoulders, stay on my boobs. Anyway, it is what it is. I want to talk about Game of Thrones and not about what I'm wearing. So yes, the first trailer for season 2 of House of the Dragon has just come out, and I'm excited. I'll be entirely honest. The first time I saw it like flash up on one of my feeds, I think it was either on Instagram or YouTube, or someone sent it to me on Discord. I was like, oh, Game of Thrones, that's the thing. Hot Dragon, HD, yeah, whatever. HotD. I'll get around to watching it when I watch it. And then I was like, I should watch that because I flippin' loved season 1 of HotD. Like, I've talked about this before, but towards the end of Game of Thrones, and it was a long, painful death of my love of Game of Thrones, but in the process of we're putting them in a hospice, tucking them in, saying goodbye, and watching it go down very painfully. It was painful. It was really painful watching the end of Game of Thrones. Trying so hard to justify it, trying so hard to appreciate the few good things like the performances, the music, the production value, the animation, the costumes, the acting, all the way through Game of Thrones is so good and so consistent and so reliable. And everyone except the writers and the heads of, like, D&D, the blame has to unfortunately go on D&D, because if you look at any other aspect of Game of Thrones, it is still a masterpiece of TV. But if you look into the writing and the story structure and the story points, wow, it's so hard to watch. And I'm at the point now where I would recommend House of the Dragon to a new viewer. I don't think I would ever recommend Game of Thrones to someone who's not seen it, because it is a slow and painful death, and all of the things that could have been built up to be extraordinary are squandered, and it hurts. But House of the Dragon is so good. It was so healing. So much of the things that people hated about Game of Thrones are answered. So there is more racial diversity. It is a female-led story, and not just in there are some female leads. It is about the female experience of living in a patriarchal society when even the women at the height of this patriarchy are still beholden unto it. And the horrifying consequences of being broodmares in a patriarchal society, and that level of like, there's a reason why there are multiple gory, in-depth birth sequences verging from the first one, which is obviously the worst one, to three other horrific birthing scenes because it's about gender, and let's be woke about it. Fuck you if you say it's not all, like, being woke is a bad thing. Let us acknowledge that this is a female story about female rage, female insecurity, but it also has male insecurity. And what I love about it, so I was watching back, I did participate in a podcast on Project Chronicle. I'll try and remember to post a link to it in the description if I remember. Remind me if I haven't. But what was so interesting about that was when I first joined, the first couple of sessions were done just by some of my friends around, and the men in the conversation, which is the vast majority of that particular group, but like they were like in love with it. It's a story about people. Just because it's got female leads, and just because a lot of the themes about female gender politics are the primary point, men love it. Men love it. And you know what? Men love it even though there is like 2 sex scenes or like 3. Like there are very few gratuitous, like just unnecessary sex scenes. There are so, like, it is, these scenes between characters are all at the lowest point of consensual is paid consent. It is a contract between someone who is a paid sex worker and someone who is not. All other sex scenes in the entire of this show are some level of reasonable consent. There is a marriage, and yes, the enthusiasm for the sexual intercourse in that marriage is lessened, but it is a form of consent, and there is paid sex work. All the other scenes are some level of consensual, but some level of power dynamic. And let us just sing that praises versus violent RIPE, because, like, Game of Thrones was just a whole other thing. And it highlights both female enjoyment of sexual activity and male impotency. Like, it actually has a scene of male impotency, which is something that I think the original Game of Thrones series would never have had, ever, because it's written by men for men, involving men's ideas of sexual fun. And so the concept of having a manly man who is meant to be a cool character, having any level of not being able to get it up, would never happen in Game of Thrones. HotD, they have it, and the character is still cool and interesting and complex, and is made more interesting and complex by that one incident of him not quite trying to actually succeed with his paid sex worker. And you know what? It has women enjoying sex and enjoying marriage. Ooh. Anyway, it's healing. HotD is healing. It is so good. The dragon's so good. The acting's so good. I remember watching it with such a bad, the first Game of Thrones, a HotD trailer that came out when the season 1 hadn't come out. I remember watching the trailer and thinking, oh god, they hired Matt Smith. Oh god, look at all those wigs. It's gonna, like, the residual trauma from the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones being like, I bet it's gonna be shit. Like, I want it to be good, but I think it's gonna be shit. And then watching it being like, oh, yes, it's so good. So I'm so excited about season 2, because if it lives up to any of the spark of season 1, it's going to be great. I don't know whether or not I'm going to do any, like, podcasty things about it or whatever. I don't really know if anything like that's going to happen. It's still months away. And you know what? I'm not going to pay to get another Now TV subscription until that show comes out, because I'm trying to save money and there's no point. So yeah. Equally, the other thing that has gotten me for the last week after watching the trailer is then I was like, all the stuff about Game of Thrones. Let me watch a load of, like, quick takes and hot takes on Game of Thrones. And so I've fallen down a bit of a Game of Thrones rabbit hole of, like, all of the old fan theories and all of the old episode analysis. And the thing that I kind of had forgotten in terms of the timelines of Game of Thrones, but now having seen a couple of videos has sparked this memory, is people think season 7, maybe season 8 is where it really went downhill. Season 6, and even the end of season 5, is when the writing decisions in Game of Thrones made it very difficult to watch. And so one of the things that kind of, the big kind of like, oh no, the first really big oh no moment for me that I remember, like, being like, I don't know how they're going to justify this, and if they have to justify this, it's going to take a lot of turning over, is the Sansa marriage. Sansa's second marriage is one of those decisions where you're like, oh, what were you trying to do other than objectifying a teenager and like somehow trying to make a it was like despicable. That's how I describe that. And particularly like maybe the scene itself or maybe the idea itself is not despicable, but how they continue to handle the Sansa and that whole arc, that whole arc involving Ramsay Bolton and Sansa Stark is despicable. It just that I can't find any justification in my heart of how that could have been made worse, in my opinion, because they made it a truly awful character to a character that was just starting to become like a fan favorite and interesting, and then at the end of it, they were like, yay, feminism! She's become a heartless murderer! And instead of making that a commentary on how maybe she shouldn't be a heartless murderer, they're like, no, she wouldn't be a cool character if she wasn't abused. Anyway, moving away from that, that was the first like line in the sand where I was like, I'm really struggling to justify this character point. Really struggling. And then season 6 has many of them. Season 6 has Jon coming back from the dead with no consequence, like you could have done anything, like, and he just comes back and it means nothing. It means literally nothing. And the further along you get in the series, the less it means. Like by the time you get to the long night, you're just like, well, what was the point of killing him then? Or what was the point in bringing him back? Just kill him. Like he would have had exactly the same level of consequences if he just died and not come back. Like give him a Ned death. Like make it consequential. See how the wildlings react to the death of their... Anyway, that's number 1. Number 2 is, like, all of the stuff involving, like, King's Landing is just a write-off. King's Landing is just a whole write-off for that whole season because they had so much good setup. They had the Sparrows, they had Marjorie Tyrell being a boss still. I love Marjorie, and I think it was a complete disservice the way that she went out. There's so much like that they could have pulled on from that chain and just nothing. Oof. Bran just does nothing. He just, becomes a robot, but overnight. Like, he's still got personality up until the point where he suddenly pops through the wall and then he's a robot. The thing that really got me, though, with season is... And I didn't realize this was season 6. In my brain, just from, like, historical osmosis, I thought this was, like, end of season 7, maybe the beginning of season 8. No, it's mid-season 6. This is the point where, like, I can remember doing the podcast with my friends and trying so hard to justify this plot point and not being able to justify it at the time, and people years later still being like, but maybe Arya's the waif. Arya getting stabbed multiple times in the stomach and then plunging into sewage water and then running away and being basically unaffected 2 days later. When Khal Drogo died from a skin-deep cut here is just so aggravating and so stupid and so antithetical to all of the themes of Game of Thrones, and lessens all of the character choices from then on, because you know which characters have got plot armor and you know which characters don't have plot armor. And so you're taking death pools at that point because you're like, well, you know, at the moment that Dany has a turn, you're like, oh, there goes her plot armor. Who's not going to make it to the end of the series? That lady. Just insane stupidity. Insane stupidity. And that happens from season 6. I thought that was like, again, season 7, season 8. But no. I can remember desperately trying to make it work and being disappointed at that junction, yet still watching it because it was fun to chat with my friends. But HotD is completely opposite. I love HotD. I could analyse HotD for ever. And I feel like all of the changes that they couldn't have justified from the source material will have consequence. Things feel consequential. And it's great. And I love it. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Also, while I was falling down this season 6, season 7, season 8 rabbit hole, one of the things that I thought of that is one of the things that is quite contentious within the choices made by the D&D, by the showrunners of of Game of Thrones, which I thought of a way that they could have justified it and made it amazing and made it so impactful for season 7, season 8 without doing too much work. They could have stuck with the event, but just put just a couple of seeds, just sprinkled a couple of seeds, and it would have made epic trees in the last 2 seasons. Is the blowing up the Sept of Baylor. Yep, it's gotten dark enough now that my camera thinks that I'm a potato. There we go. So the thing that I came to the conclusion about is the blowing up of the House of Baylor the Sept of Baylor could have been fascinating and could have been easily an actually genius move of Cersei's, not just a random I want to blow up my enemies move. It could have actually been genius. So, one of the things that kind of hinders the feeling of Game of Thrones season 6 is there's no real connection between what's happening in Essos and what's happening in King's Landing, Westeros areas. Even from season 1, there's constant like, what's happening with Dany? Let's go kill her. This is happening with the Dragon Queen. This is happening over here. Characters shifting between the two. But in season 6, it's kind of neglected. I don't think anyone ever mentions to Cersei that Tyrion has been made Hand of the Queen to Daenerys Stormborn. I don't think it's ever mentioned. If it is, let me know. But I don't think it ever is. And I think it would be so interesting if they did just a couple little tweaks to the end of that story. So it's never really... Those two things are complete disconnect. I genuinely can't really remember what happens with Dany in most of that season. Again, I've just watched some recap videos, so I have a slightly clearer memory than I would previously, but I remember just being like, things are happening with her, I guess, but it's not connected at all to what's happening with the main story. And I feel like they could have done a lot more connections between those two. So notably, there is a lot of shit happening with Dany that would affect politics in Westeros. So we have in the Seven Kingdoms, in the mainland. So Dany going missing. I'm sure Cersei would be absolutely so excited that the queen of all of the shit over that side has gone missing, seemingly. Now, there is some questions on that. Obviously, the Tyrion and Grey Worm and Missandei are trying to like rule in her stead and being like, she'll be back soon. She's totally not missing. But like, the word might get out. Word might get out, or it might not. Either way, the queen, things are happening with the queen over there. Equally, Tyrion, again, as I said, Hand of the Queen. Cersei would be fuming. She would be she would be throwing furniture like she's the main villain from Resident Evil, Resident Evil Village. Like she would be just like chucking furniture. She would be screaming. She would be getting drunk. She would like if she found out that Tyrion was alive and had somehow made it to be Hand of the Queen to a different queen. She's not that stupid. She would know that he is smart enough to be a real problem, as well as him having murdered her father, having lost her daughter, having lost her first son. She would be so fucking pissed. But I don't think we ever see a reaction to her finding out that Tyrion is alive and Hand of the Queen. So she would know. She would know about this. It's not going to be hidden knowledge that he's gone there and done that. Equally, there's the whole thing with the Sparrows and the whole thing with Marjorie Tyrell and the whole thing with the fate of the Seven. And there is a lot of stuff that Cersei should be doing. And what she does most of this season is just kind of mill around looking bitchy. Now, there is a throwaway thing, which is in one of the clips that was in one of my highlight reels that I watched recently, where she talks to Qyburn and is like, Qyburn, can you make sure your birds are everywhere? And nothing happens with it. Now, how this could have been awesome, the blowing up of Sept of Baylor, because as a plot point, I hated it at the time. I absolutely loathed it because you're killing off Marjorie Tyrell, who I think was one of the best characters, one of the best written, most complex characters. You're killing off the whole of the Tyrells, apart from Olenna. Like, all of those really interesting ethical and moral and, like, religious debates that happen as part of the Cersei Lannister versus the Faith versus the Tyrells. All of that just literally gets blown up, and I hated it at the time. I really genuinely was just like, what the frick are they doing? But the way it could have worked and would have been genius. And I pinged this morning, having my first cup of tea, because I have like 10 of these a day. So, what if, when she was sending Qyburne's birds around the city, we had her reacting to Tyrion being handed the queen, we had her spreading some rumours, like whispers around King's Landing about this queen across the way, her having conversation with the head of the Sparrows when he's kind of on her side, or maybe getting her to tell Tommen to tell the Sparrow that they have anxieties about this queen who has got dragons, who's going to bring foreign religion across from the other side, who's threatening the faith with her religion and with her beastly evil ways, who's sided, again, so much of this was set up, who is siding with red priestesses. She literally had that scene where they set up stuff with the red priestess while over the other side of the continent, and had the red priestesses be like, she is the one true ruler, she is Azor Ahai. If they'd fucking had this thing going on. So she gets Tommen to tell the Sparrow, we how can we be we have to, as the faith militant, as religious believers in the Seven, we have to fight against this evil queen who is bringing her hedonistic, red priestess, R'hllor stuff, and dragons and blood and tyranny across the seas. They're going to threaten our religion. They're going to threaten our home. And there's rumours that she might do something evil to our country. She's going to attack us. And you remember that she's the daughter of the Mad King who was obsessed with green fire. You remember Tommen telling the Sparrow from Cersei seeding these things throughout the city. We could have merchants occasionally gossiping about, oh, I've heard, you remember this bitch across the seas. I hear there's spies in the city. I hear she sent spies. I hear that because her hand is now Tyrion, the kinslayer, the murderer of the king, is now hand of this evil villainous queen across the way who is hedonistic and satanistic and evil beyond count. I hear that he's been telling her how to slip spies into the city. I hear there are spies in the city from Daenerys Stormborn. I think, do you see that Screech urchin over there who was totally stealing bread the other day? I think he's a spy for Daenerys Stormborn in the city. I think they've infiltrated the city. I think they're going to attack the religion. That's why we need to be religious to the faith of the Seven, that they will protect us from the evil queen across the sea who is totally going to infiltrate the city and do something evil. Oh, her hand of the king was totally using green fire in the Battle of the Blackwater, just like her father, the Mad King who was also totally evil and insane and was using green fire. And you know what? Her hand is Tyrion Lannister, who's evil and a kinslayer, and was also using green fire in the Battle of Blackwater. And they're going to totally attack our right of being people. They're going to bring over their riders who are Dothraki, and they're going to rape and kill our women. They're going to destroy our religion. This religious fervour just spreading, and they could have had the seeds of this sprinkled, just sprinkled throughout the entire of season 6. And then you know what? Green fire blows up the Sept of Baylor. And Cersei just watches on, smiling. Wouldn't that be so good? Oh! Wouldn't have it been so fucking good if that was what happened? So I feel like if GR was writing this version of the story and wanted to commit to the Sept of Baylor being blown up with wildfire, that's how he would have done it. It's still Cersei doing it. It still happens. It still kills off the Tyrells and the Sparrows. But you know what it does? It sets up animosity between Cersei and Dany for the last season. It makes it so much more deep. And it means that Dany over the other side will hear that someone is claiming or blaming her and Tyrion for blowing up the Sept of Baylor in King's Landing. She will hear about that and she will be fucking pissed because she's not responsible for it, but how can she deny it? How can she deny that the Sept of Baelor was blown up by her and Tyrion when Tyrion is the one who knows where the wildfire is and her father was killing people with wildfire beforehand, and she has sided with the Red Priestesses? How could she deny it? How could Dany deny it? And then she's a foreign invader doing this, having been responsible for blowing up the Sept of Baelor. That's also why there is no consequences for Cersei. Cersei can just coast now. It's definitely not her problem. It could have been her problem. Maybe there's some rumours. Maybe actually it was Cersei who did it. But who could claim that to be true when Cersei, yes, she missed her court hearing. Oh, what a shame. The Queen Mother's dead. Oh, what a shame. But clearly, it was Daenerys Stormborn's spies who blew up the Sept of Baelor. It had to be. There's no other way. Wouldn't have that been so much better? Because Dany cannot deny it, except it being the truth that she wasn't responsible. How can Cersei not claim that it's Dany? It would have been so good. It would have made so much more sense. It would have been logical and easy. It would have been easy for Cersei just to sprinkle some seeds, just put some rumours out there, just sprinkle some stuff, because the small council would have been aware of all of these facts. They would have been informed to Cersei. She would have then easily been able to communicate it to the High Sparrow. Anxiety in the whole of King's Landing about evil foreigners wanting to infiltrate and do harm to their religion, and then their sept gets blown up. Can you imagine how that would have affected all of the characterization of the queens going into the last couple of seasons? And knowing that Cersei's so ruthless and intelligent, and it just would have been so good. It would have been so good. And Tyrion's got no defense because he used it. He used it at the Battle of Blackwater. And Daenerys has got no defense because she's using the Red Priestesses. And her father was responsible for using... Anyway, it just... It's like... It's one of my fan theories that I'm so proud of. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very proud of this fan theory that had they just... It would have been so easy to do in that season. It would have made those two plot lines feel so much more connected. It would have made the wrapping up of the story of the Sparrows and the Tyrells so much more interesting. It would have just... made everything for the next couple of seasons just a little bit more tense. Like all of the stuff where Cersei's going to parlay with Daenerys Stormborn, her people would have been like, no, don't do it. Don't you go and try and parlay with that evil queen. And when she says, there's doom in the north, Cersei would have been like, but you blew up our keep. And it's one of those things which is so original to the Song of Ice and Fire books, because a lot of the times when the stories work best is when characters are backed into a lie or backed into such a convincing story that there's literally, you cannot think of a way out of it. So there's no way for Tyrion to deny and the blowing up of the Sept, and there's no reason for Cersei to come out and tell the truth. It's a perfect lie. And it would have been so easy to, because you've got Qyburn and his little birds that he's stolen from Varys, so he could have had that floating through the thing. You've got Cersei being able to manipulate Tommen, who then would have been able to, genuinely told the Sparrow, I'm really worried about this bitch across the seas. I just, it makes my brain happy. It's been a long time since I've been this excited and fan theory about a series, and this is a series that has been gone for 7 years. But it makes my brain happy to chew on, and it's bringing me a lot of joy. So, ting. Thank you for hanging out today. I just wanted to get this out of my brain because I was so excited. And you know what? My tea isn't actually that cold. I'm just going to finish it though because it's right on the borderline. I'm Exci-tea-ed. Thank you for hanging out. I will see you at some point in the future. I'm terrible at producing content on YouTube, but I'm going to try. Have a good one. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Check me out on Twitch. That's where I actually do most of my content because that's a place where I actually feel like people care. And yeah, be good folks. Bye. Bloop.